Just a quick note before we start, this is specific for the Xbox 360 and PS3 Les Paul models, but it can be used as a base guide for any of the other models that the Solderless kit supports. This is a guide for my solderless DIY RGB kit for Guitar Hero controllers. You can order it on my Etsy if you are anywhere in the world. And if you want to save a few bucks, you can go onto my direct website and order it if you are in the United States or Canada. Links will be in the description and pinned comments. Inside the kit, you'll have a Type-C 10-foot USB-C cable, washers, screws, and tilt sensors, some translucent frets, the Zero Board SL itself, the RGB LED solderless version fretboard itself, some splicers, jumper cables, and JST cables to connect everything together. You'll also need a few things that aren't included in the kit, such as some wire strippers, a screwdriver, and some bits. I would recommend a full set, but if you want to get specific, we're going to use a Phillips head PH1, a security bit Torx T9 and T10, and a 1/16 inch flathead. Beyond that, we're also going to need some flush cutters to make some case modifications. Start off by separating the neck from the body, and then use your T10 screwdriver to undo all the screws on the back of the neck. There's going to be 4 that are missing for me. You'll need to remove those as well. I've already been inside this neck though. Open it up and use your Phillips head to remove the fretboard. It might take a little doing to get it to actually release from the plastic. That's fine, that's expected. Just be patient, it'll pop right off. Also go down to the bottom and remove the neck connector. Same story, it might be a little hard to get out. Then remove the silicone and stock frets and pop in the 3D printed frets that you got with the kit. Next, we're going to install the fretboard. So take your fretboard and 2 screws and 2 circular washers and go ahead and screw it in. You don't want the washers to be too tight against the board, just screw them in until they start to bow a little bit, and that should be good. After that's done, go ahead and give the frets a quick try. Make sure that there's no issues with them sticking or anything. Next, we're going to hook up the JST connectors. Make sure you orientate them the correct way, as I show here. The blank side should be up facing you, and the metal side should be facing down towards the board. These are small connectors, so they may take a little bit of finagling to get in, but with some patience, you'll get there. Now that those cables are installed, we actually have to do a quick bit of case modification on the rear neck shell. As you can see here, we'll have to snip off some of the supports on the back of the neck. Here I have an unmodified neck on the right and a modified neck on the left, just so you can see the difference. Now take your flush cutters and make a cut on the very end of those neck supports, and then make another cut about halfway through. Wiggle it back and forth to free up the plastic, and it should come off. It might take some additional snips to get it loose enough to wiggle back and forth, but it should come out. Don't get worried if it doesn't come out all in one chunk, as you see it happen to me there. Just take your time, wiggle the chunks out, and keep in mind this is on the inside of the case, so it won't be visible from the outside if you make any mistakes. So do the same for the top, snip at the end, and snip about halfway through, and then just wiggle it back and forth the same you did for the bottom. That one came out a lot cleaner for me. Now we're going to move on to the next section, make a snip right at the end, and then make a snip right where that circular, or cylindrical rather, support begins, and wiggle it back and forth. This one's a bit longer, so you might have to split it in half like I did here, and then just, same as the other ones, wiggle it back and forth till those pieces come free. And then feel free to clean up to your heart's content. But that's all the modification we need to do for the neck. Now we're going to hit the faceplate release button and peel off the faceplate. Then we're going to flip it over and take our T10 bit and unscrew all of the screws on the back, including the one under the warranty label. Make sure you get that one. Pop it open. And before you pop it all the way open, you're going to want to remove the neck connector. Pop that out right there. That will allow you to open up even further, and then disconnect the battery terminal. And now the 2 sides will be free from each other. Next, we're going to use our Phillips head to remove these 4 screws on the strum board. You only have to remove the 4 corner screws. You don't have to mess with any in the middle. Remove all of those. To free up the strum board, we won't be able to remove it just yet. but it makes it easier to work with. So, using your flush cutters, cut out the Start Select board, as well as the whammy bar. And those are the only two items that we're going to keep. The rest of the stuff inside this can all go. And what I mean by go is just clipping the wires. You're going to see the only thing I actually remove is this RJ11 port, the foot pedal port that never got used, because that's where I'm going to feed the USB-C cable out of the guitar. Everything else is going to stay in, but you're going to see I'm going to clip all the wires just to clear everything up. And once all those wires are clipped, you can remove the stock strum board. And after I come back and clear out the rest of the wires, you'll see the only two things that we are going to connect to the board that are still left on the guitar are indeed the Start Select board and the whammy bar. So now I'm going to put in the replacement strum board, the Zero Board SL. Then I'm just going to hold the strum board in place and test the strum bar. If it feels too loose to you, you can put tape around the points of the strum bar that contact the switches just to make it a little tighter, but I like how it feels, so I'm going to move on. Now, as you can see, everything reaches without the need for splicing the cables, but I'm going to show you how to do it anyway later on. First, though, I'm going to show you how to use these screw terminals. You'll use the flathead to turn the screw on the top counterclockwise to open up the little window that receives the wire. You can see I'm turning it counterclockwise there, and the window is moving down. You can see it on that center one. And then the one left, it was actually already down, so you just have to make sure they're all open. Now we're going to hook up the whammy bar, and the only pin that really matters is the ADC pin, which is the center pin on the screw terminal, and will also be the center pin on the whammy bar itself. So you see the center on the whammy needs to go to the center on the screw terminal. So the color of the wire for our center pin on the whammy bar is red. So that means we have to make sure that the red wire goes to the center pin of the whammy. The other two pins, doesn't matter. Orange could go on the left or the right, same for brown, it could go on the left or the right. So what I'm doing here is separating the wires so I can come in with the wire stripper, and I usually use the 26 or 24 slot to get these wires stripped. You just want to clamp down on the wire and pull up with the stripper, and you'll see that the wire tubing comes right off, and you want to do that for all of the wires. And once the wires are stripped, you're going to want to twist them with your fingers just so they fit better inside the screw terminals. If you try to put them in there when they're all frayed, it's just not a good time, and you can easily bridge wires together. So make sure they're nice and tight when you put them in there. Something else you want to make sure of is you don't want too much wire coming out of the screw terminal. You see I'm test fitting it here, and I'm realizing that it's too much wire exposed. So I just take the shear part of the wire strippers and I cut down the copper a little bit, and that will fit much better. Once I have that wire in place, I'm going to turn the screw clockwise and clamp it down. You do not need it to be super tight. When you feel the terminal start to clamp the wire, just give it a little bit of an extra nudge just to secure it in there. It does not need to be extremely tight. Once the whammy's installed, we're going to move on to the Start Select board. I remove this with two Phillips head screws. You'll see here that I have joined the two center wires together. This only needs to be done on the Xbox version of the Les Paul. The PS3 only has 3 pins. You'll see me compare it later. But this needs to be done in order for the Start Select buttons to work correctly. Now, I've cut these very short for the purpose of this example, just so I can show you how to use the splicer. You do not have to use the splicer. You do not have to cut them this short. You can just cut them on the ends of the cables and then join the two together in the center. The other two, the outside two, they're just on their own, same as the whammy bar. Cut them and then twist them with your fingers. But you have to make sure that the center two are cut and spliced together, twisted together. And like I said, this is only for the Xbox model. I'll bring up the PS3 board here in just a second so you can see the PS3 board is only 3 pins: start, ground, and select. And those, of course, just go to their corresponding pins on the board. Here's the splicer. To use these, you lift the levers up and insert whatever you want to splice into it. So let's just take these wires here. And then you flip the levers down and they will latch onto the wires. And give it a tug, make sure that's connected. Very easy to work with. So just like that example, we're going to take the included jumper wires, put them into one end of the splicer, and snap those levers down. Make sure it's nice and tight. And then we're going to put the start select board wires that we stripped into the other end. Make sure the brown end is facing up because that is the orientation it has to sit in order for it to work. And again, if you're having trouble putting them in like I was there, make sure that they're twisted together very well. Don't put the wires in too deep, otherwise the levers will clamp on the sheath of the wire and not the metal itself. So the 2 wires we spliced together are going to be our ground. As you can see on the board, the ground pin is the 3rd slot in the screw terminal there. So our ground pin, which is the 2 wires that we've coiled together, is in the center position on the splicer. And that is going to be, for me, orange. That's going to be the orange wire. For you, it might be a different color. Make sure that you match them up. But I'm going to connect those 2 splice wires to the ground terminal. The other 2, just like the whammy, do not matter. You can plug them in either way to the remaining 2 terminals. And now we're going to put it back. Make sure that if your silicone has fallen off, you put it back, just like I did there. You're going to reseat the start select and screw back in the 2 Phillips head screws that were holding it in place. I also take this opportunity to put my cable in and put it under the start select board so it sits a lot tighter inside the guitar, but you don't have to do that. Next, we're going to take 3 screws and 3 circular washers and 1 screw and 1 rectangular washer and screw in the strum board. The 3 circular washers go in the top right, top left, and bottom left slots, and then the rectangular one goes in the bottom right. If the washers bend around the screw terminals, that's fine. They'll bend and they'll hold just fine. But that rectangular washer has to go in the bottom right to fit properly. Before moving on, make sure to strum the strum bar a little bit to make sure it feels right. If it doesn't, check this joint right here. That is the strum bar and the strum bracket. If those have any space between them, your strum bar is going to feel way, way off. Now we're going to slide the front of the neck into the slot of the front of the body, just so we can get it close together so we can connect the JST cables from the fretboard to the strum board. The strum board and the fretboard will have matching labels, so make sure the wire that is going from RGB LED goes to RGB LED on the strum board. Make sure the one that says ground orange blue goes to ground orange blue on the fretboard, and then make sure the one that says yellow red green goes to the same slot on the fret and strum board. Make sure they're all matching. And here I'm just going to tidy up the cable a little bit, make sure that it sits well in the neck. I'm going to take a piece of tape and just secure it in place, but you want to make sure that none of the wires are covering any of those screw standoffs, because, of course, if you put in a screw with a wire covering it, you're going to damage or break the wire, and that's no good. So I fit the back of the neck to the front of the neck, make sure that there's no space problems. I try all the frets, make sure they feel good, and then I screw in all the screws to connect the 2 neck pieces together. I didn't put in the 4 at the end because I plan on taking this apart again, but you will need to put those in. I also put a piece of tape on the wires in the body just to keep them in place. Now we have to prepare the tilt switches. So take one of your tilt switches and bend the legs 90 degrees at the body. So you see I'm going to bend them 90 degrees from the bottom of the cylinder right there. You see how it's not exactly 90 degrees, but it's pretty close to 90 degrees. You want it to look like that. Do the same with the other one. Go slow. If you go too fast, you may break the pins. So just slowly bend it 90 degrees, or as close to 90 degrees as you can get it. So they look like kind of an L shape. Or J, I guess. Then take those tilt sensors and slide them into the tilt sensor slots facing left. Make sure they go down as far as they can. Don't rush it. Make sure to work slowly. You don't want to break the little legs on the tilt sensors. That's no fun. Once those are in, push them down slightly towards the board. The more you push them down, the more you'll have to angle the guitar upwards in order to activate tilt. I like my tilt just before 90 degrees, so I only tilted them down a little bit. Now before we can put it back together, we have one final case modification on the back of the body. Those two standoffs I just pointed out are gonna have to go. So what I do is I make a halfway cut through the bottom side, as well as the top side, to kind of split those standoffs in half. And then once they're split in half like that, I just take each half, wiggle it back and forth with the flush cutters, and they usually give way. Again, don't panic if they don't come out all in one chunk. Just get them out as well as you can, and then you can come back in with the flush cutters and clean up and make them, well, flush. And if it doesn't look the best, don't worry, it's on the inside of the guitar, so it's not too big of a deal. So I'm going to do the same thing for that top standoff after I clean up the bottom. And you're just going to rinse and repeat for the top. Split it in half, wiggle it back and forth, and then clean up the rest. And that's it for case modification. There are no more case modifications needed, and we are almost done. So now, what I usually do is I tie the USB-C cable into a knot, if you haven't already, and then I tuck it, again, under the start select board just so it sits a lot tighter inside the guitar and won't come out if someone accidentally tugs on the cable when it's put together. Okay, putting it together, snap on the back, but don't screw it in place yet. Just make sure that it fits, because we're going to do some programming. If you don't have it already, download the guitar configurator, link will be in the description, and download the version that says latest. And I have Windows, so I'm going to download the exe, but if you have Mac, you would download the DMG file. Then install and open the guitar configurator. With your guitar connected, you should see it show up as Raspberry Pi Pico. Make sure that's selected and click continue, then start programming. Give it a second, and then click start configuring. Now if you see a black screen with no guitar, that's fine. Just close the configurator, reopen it, and then you'll see your Raspberry Pi there, and then click continue. And now this is what you should see. You should see a guitar in the background. So now we're going to program all the buttons on the guitar. So what you want to do is start with green, click on green or hover over green, click change pin binding, automatically find pin binding, then hit the green fret on the guitar. Rinse and repeat, same for red, click red, change pin binding, automatically find pin binding, press the button. You're going to want to do that for every single button on the guitar controller, with the exception of the D-pad and home button, of course, because we didn't hook those up. Also make sure you do the same for the whammy, automatically find the pin, wiggle the whammy bar a little bit, then click apply changes. And before we can calibrate the whammy, we need to click the right button. So click right, give it a few seconds, it'll disconnect and reconnect. And then once it's reconnected, click the whammy bar again and click calibrate whammy. Now, what you want to do after clicking calibrate whammy is not touch the whammy bar at all. Click OK, then hold down the whammy bar for the maximum value. Hold it all the way down, then click OK. Then let it go again for dead zone. Then just give it a little bit of a push downwards to set the dead zone. Then while holding that down, click OK. And then give it a test. If it looks like this on the screen, you did it right. Click OK, and then click right. Once it reconnects, we're going to configure the tilt. Click Configure Tilt, change the tilt sensor type to digital, and then automatically find the pin binding. Now what you're going to want to do at this point is tilt your guitar 90 degrees into the air, as you would normally for tilt. And if this waiting for a pin message goes away, that means that it detected it. You can click Apply Changes, click right, and then you'll be done. If you're tilting your guitar and this waiting for pin is not going away, click Cancel, Open the back of your guitar again, slightly adjust your tilt sensors, and then try automatically finding the pin binding again. See if it works. If it doesn't, cancel, rinse, repeat until it finally does register the pin, then click Apply Changes, then Write, then you'll be good. Okay, now the fun part. We're going to set up the LEDs. So click on Configure LEDs, change the option to APA 102, and then you're going to want to reorder these colors. Make sure it goes orange, blue, yellow, red, and then green. So basically the opposite of the normal configuration. Then click Write, and once it reconnects, you should be able to see your frets light up. But what if you want a custom color? Well, you would go to each individual fret that you want to change the color for, and you would click on it, and then Set LED Color. And you can see, as you change the colors will update live on the guitar so you can see what they look like. So go through, set them up to whatever you want them to be. I just chose random colors here for the sake of demonstration. But go through each of them, change them, and then make sure, when you're done making your changes, that you click Write. Otherwise, they won't save. After it reconnects, you'll see I got my custom colors. Alright, now that we've confirmed that everything works in the programming, we're gonna crack the back open one more time, remove the tape so we can adjust the wires so the neck can slide forward a little bit so we can get the faceplate back on. This is only if you want to put the faceplate back on. I usually keep it off if there's a lot of stickers on them. But if you want to put it back on, slide the neck up and then slide it back down over the faceplate after you've put it back on. Then flip it back over, and put the tape back on. Then pop the back on, and then close it up. Make sure to put in all the screws, and you'll be good to go. Oh yeah, one last thing. Since we did hardwire it, technically, I like to put a piece of tape over the neck release button so you don't accidentally switch it and break the wires, because that's no fun. I usually have black duct tape that I use, but of course I couldn't find it today, so we're using normal duct tape. And that's about it. If you guys have any questions about the kit, let me know. Links will be in the description and the pinned comment for pretty much all the tools I used here. This was a video-specific guide on the Xbox 360 and PS3 Les Pauls, but it can be used as kind of like a base guide for other models as well. There will be specific model videos coming out for all other models that the Solderless kit is compatible with, so keep an eye out for that.